Okay, so the next section in Savitch edition 10, chapter 6, section 1, we're going to talk about the object, continuing of the object. We already talked about it. So in this case, what we're doing in this chapter, the objects are created by just creating a variable of the type class. So we're going to put the class at the left side. We're going to put a name on the right side. It's going to create that object. When you move forward, there is a specific way of creating object, but this one is doing some stuff in the background, so we don't have to worry about it right now. So remember what we talked about, my example of a car or a townhouse. We have to create an object of them before we use them. So we have to have a physical object. So in stream and other stream are objects of the IF stream and OF stream, and there are a bunch of functions that are available, and as already written, that's going to be available for me to use it when I have an object of the class. So in this case, we talked about it, that if I have a class car and I create an object of a car, now I can go and paint my car. So if I go to a body shop and I say paint car, they have to know what car I'm talking about. So they need to know a physical car. So I'm going to identify my physical car. That is the dot operator. So when you say paint, the paint has to be connected through a dot operator to an existing object. So in body shop, my car has to be there for them to paint it. And when we say paint, they have to know, let's say there is 10 cars in front of the shop. They have to identify which one do we paint. And let's say I want to paint it yellow. So we have to identify the object. So that's why we need that dot operator. So we might have 10 cars in there, and the dot operator is going to say which one we're going to do what. So one of them is going to be paint yellow, the other one is going to be paint blue, one of them just has a repair order because the last paint wasn't good. One of them is just somebody's car parking over there, they don't need anything. So the dot operator is going to connect the function that was in the class to the object. So that's what the member function is. So if we have townhouses and we have 30, 40, 50 townhouses just look alike, if I want to repair something, they have to come to the correct house to repair it. So I want to paint, I want to repair, they have to come to the correct house. So that dot operator is going to identify which object do we want to apply that function. So we might call it the same in different classes, or we can have the same function of different object in the same class. So let's say you have Word, Excel, PowerPoint. When you say print, it's going to print something in each one of them. But the print function in Word is different than the print function in Excel, and it's different than PowerPoint. Even though the name is the same, they have different way of doing their job. But if I'm using Microsoft Word or Google Doc and I want to print, then it's going to say, okay, which document do you want to print? The dot operator is going to tell me this is the document I want to print. And that's where the print is going to go. So every class is going to have their own functions. When you create an object, those functions are going to go to the object, and we're going to be using dot operator to access those functions. We call them member functions. So classes are like a template. In the future, you're gonna be writing the classes of your own. And right now there are some classes already created. So we don't have to create them. We're just gonna use them. So IFStream, we create an object for it. And then this object is gonna have all access to all the functions that was in IFStream. So IFStream is a class, the instream is object, and now we have, now in this case, what we have a class, IFStream, and we are creating multiple objects of the same class. It's just that manufacturing is creating multiple cars that if they have the same class, they're gonna look identical to each other. But each one of them is going to have a different VIN. Later on, when you register them, they have different license plate. They have different owners. But if you look at them, they look the same. So that's the way it goes with the classes, that the objects are using the same classes. They're going to be identical to each other, but they have different data to identify them. So when we call the open, the dot operator is going to say which object do I want to use. My example of painting in front of the body shop, if there is 10 cars in there, we have to identify which object we want to paint. In here, we want to identify which object do we want to open a file. So we're going to call the open with one of the files, and we're going to call the open with another object with another file. So this object is going to be connected to a file. This object is going to be connected to another file. So the class determines the member function of an object. So we have it in the class. When we create an object, we're going to use that member function. We talked about this already. How do we call it? We're going to be using a dot operator to call a function. So first, we have to create an object. Two, we're going to be using a dot operator, the functions available to us. We don't have to write those objects. We're going to use the dot operator to execute that function. And that function, just like any function that you use right now, they have either some parameters or no parameters. That's okay. So in this case, open needs one parameter, which is the file name, to connect itself to that file. So that's a calling object. Remember, we cannot do the class. It has to be object. We have the dot operator. We have the member function to do that. All right, so I'm going to stop right here. Again, I want you to think about these questions or any questions that you might have to kind of intrigue yourself to how much of this you absorb or reflect back or think about it. So go over these questions, put the video on pause, think about them, don't rush through it, just think about it, see how much you absorb. Maybe you should go back, maybe you should ask questions, maybe you should talk to your classmates about some stuff, then we can learn more moving forward.